Flosstube, my name is Amy. I am the Globetrotting Stitcher, and I am back today for Flosstube episode number 2. This is a YouTube channel about cross stitch, and I am so glad that you are here to hang out with me today and take a look at what I'm working on. I'd like to start out by just saying a heartfelt thank you to everybody in the Flosstube community for the incredibly kind welcome that you have given me as you watched my first video. Just so many kind comments and so much encouragement, and I really appreciated hearing how much all of you enjoyed it and liked seeing what I'm working on. So I just wanted to say thank you. I've heard many other Flosstubers, when they first start making videos, talk about just how welcoming the community has been to them. And so I would just like to say thank you again to everybody. It was such an encouraging way to kind of kick off my first encounter with Flosstube and making videos. I would also like to start off by saying a tremendous thank you to two Flosstubers who gave me the kindest shout outs I think I've ever heard. So Becca Sambry Stitches and Daylene at So Grateful just gave like a rock star, super kind, incredibly thoughtful shout outs. And so thank you to both of you. That just made my day to hear those. And if you guys aren't already watching them, Becca is the queen of finishing. She has her own unique style, and she is constantly doing these amazing FFOs that she's so creative. And so if you need great finishing ideas, she stitches like the wind, and she is constantly coming up with something new and showing it on her Flosstube channel. And so you really ought to be watching her. And Daylene is the ultimate Renaissance woman. She does a little bit of everything. She bakes things that make you want to forget your diet, and she quilts, and she sews, and she gardens, and she stitches. She does all of the things, and she is also just this incredible force of positivity and gratitude and joy. And so if you're not watching her, I would also encourage you to check her out because she's just a lovely human being. So I did receive a question on my first video last week from Jeannie Wilcox, and so I wanted to respond to that before getting into everything else. Jeannie asked why a person would choose to stitch on the diagonal, and that's a really great question, and I think the answer is going to be a little bit different for every Flosstuber. For me, the reason I stitch on the diagonal, part of that was for me, it's really helpful, particularly on full coverage. So I've heard of a lot of other folks who stitch full coverage. A lot of times the tendency, if you're not a cross-country stitcher, is to stitch in the columns. And what I've seen happen for a lot of folks is that there'll be these lines in the floss, and I think it's because there's no overlap between the columns on the back. And it's so heavily, there's so much thread that crosses within each column. And so what it does is it sort of creates these indentation lines that can show up on the front of your fabric when you stitch in columns. And so stitching in diagonals tends to help eliminate that problem because you're stitching across and down as opposed to just straight down. I have found on my own full coverage that stitching that way does not prevent lines at page breaks, and so you have to do a little bit of stitching over and to help eliminate that. But at least stitching in the diagonal does help to eliminate that indentation line between columns if that's how you stitch. Obviously, if you're a cross-country stitcher, that's not a problem for you. So that for me is one of the reasons I stitch in the diagonal. The other thing is I just really enjoy how the design emerges that way and how I see the picture showing up. So that's what works for me anyway. So what have I been up to since filming my first Flosstube? Well, it's been a busy couple of weeks, and I am the consummate person who always estimates they're going to get more stitching done than they actually do. But it's been really, really busy at work for me. I've been putting in really long days and having early morning calls and late night calls. And so my stitching time has not been, you'll see I haven't made as much progress as I had planned to and hoped to, but that's okay because I'm thankful to be working and doing work that's meaningful to me. So I've been doing a lot of that. I've also been doing a lot of gardening. So This is one of our rainy times of year. Well, let's be honest, most of the times of year are rainy here in the Seattle area. But we get quite a bit of rain, of course, in the spring, as many people do. And so everything is growing super fast, and there's a lot of weeds to be taken care of. And so I've been spending a lot of time out in the yard with my husband, trying to get the yard into a condition that will convince the neighbors not to run us out of town. So that's been taking up a fair bit of time. And then we've also had a little bit of doggy drama to deal with, unfortunately. One of my two stitching buddies, Bear, who made a few illicit appearances behind me in the video last time. Bear, we noticed him going limp a couple of weeks ago. He was limping a lot. And so we took him to the vet, and they said, well, we're concerned that this might be a more long-term problem, but or an anatomical issue that's showing up, but let's put him on some anti-inflammatory pills for a couple of weeks and see if that fixes the problem and he gets better on his own. And unfortunately, after a couple of weeks of being on pain meds, although he's improving and he's putting some weight on his back leg, he's not improving enough and still limping. And so we had to take him back in this week and have some radiographs done. You guys, so expensive. I was like, oh, x-rays, $100, no problem. $150, no problem. No. It is way more expensive than that. So, but that's okay. So we had those done, and unfortunately, the diagnosis is that Bear's canine cruciate ligament, which is similar to the ACL in humans, has some sort of damage or a tear to it, and it's not an injury. It's strictly related to the slope of his tibia. So, too much detail, I know, but the long and the short of it is that our poor sweet Bear is going to need to have surgery sometime in the next few weeks, so that he can live a good, healthy, pain-free life. So Mama's stitching budget is dropping rapidly to zero for the next few years. So it's a good thing I have lots of charts to stitch. So anyway, that's a bit of what we've been up to. Another person who commented, actually I think a couple people who commented on my first video said they'd love to see some of my previous finishes. So I've brought a couple things with me today to share with you. And one of the things that is kind of interesting about my stitching, so you would think that for having stitched as many years as I have, which as I was saying in my last video has been over 30 years now, you would think that I would have a lot of finishes to show. But the truth is that I never actually kept any of my stitching up until about 3 years ago. I loved everything I stitched, but I always gave it away. And so the pieces that I've stitched, some of them are to friends I haven't seen in many years. I don't even know if they still have them. I know at least one of the pieces I've stitched has mysteriously gone missing. And a lot of the pieces I've done are with family members, particularly with my parents or, extended family. So a lot of things that I just don't have with me to be able to show you. And so I'm going to try and get some pictures as I'm able to, but I'll show you a few of the things I've done and kept for myself in more recent years. So the first thing I'll show you, as I was sharing in the last video, I am working my way through the Country Cottage Needleworks Cottages of the Month. And I've had to kind of skip around because I keep thinking, oh yeah, I'll stitch that super quickly and it'll be ready for whatever month is coming up. And then it always takes me longer than I think it will. And so, yeah, so I've skipped around. So the first one I'm going to show you is the September Cottage, which I finished last year. And this was a really fun stitch, and I love the colors, and it's so cheerful and bright. And so I stitched this using the called for flosses, and it is on 28 count mushroom Lugana. And I finished it using sort of the Priscilla and Chelsea method. So the stitching is actually it's on a sticky board, but the sticky is on the back, so everybody breathe okay. I did not put the actual stitching on the sticky side. The sticky side is on the back, and the stitching is on the non-sticky side. And then I actually, this was a little bit insane, but this pretty little daisy border here, I actually sewed that onto the green fabric before I put that on sticky board, and then the final layer is also sticky board. One thing that I really love about this particular, the finish, is this frame was actually handmade for me by my dad. And then when my dad finished building it, my husband stained it for me. And it was actually made for these pieces in particular, so that I have a great frame to display all of them on. And so as the seasons and the months come and go, I'll add some picks or some ribbons or something to kind of fancy it up a little bit more. But this is sort of like the base FFO for all of my monthly cottages. So yeah, September Cottage by Country Cottage Needleworks, frame handmade with love. And then the second finish I'm going to show you is a finish. So this one, there's kind of a funny story behind how this finish came to be. So when my husband and I were first dating over 10 years ago, I was stitching on a couple of different, I was stitching on one piece in particular, and it was a piece that I had actually started back in, I think, 2006. And some of you are familiar with Little Wings by Lavender and Lace. It's the mama in the big, beautiful green dress with all of the, the flounces and the layers, and she's with her little daughter who's in a white dress, and there's like a birdhouse and some flowers, and it's very pretty and very Victorian. And so I had started stitching that in 2006 when my brother got married. And I stitched it I picked it out and stitched it specifically for one of my aunts, who I love her so much. And I had showed it to her at the wedding, and I said, this is because she lives across the country from us. And so when she came for the wedding, I said, I'm working on this piece, I'm stitching it for you. And then because it's a massive piece, I got bored because I was a monogamous stitcher. And so I kind of stopped stitching for a while and hadn't worked on it in a long time. And so when my husband and I were dating, initially I was doing a lot more stitching again then, and so I picked it up and decided I wanted to finish it. And so my husband in the early year or so of our relationship was watching as I was working on this design. And he's this really thoughtful and sentimental person about things like that, and objects like that. And so as I was coming close to finishing it, he said, "Can I have that?" And at first I thought he was kidding because it was this Victorian lady, and my husband is, he's a man. He does the action figures, and, and so I was like, he wants a Victorian lady, but I said, no, you can't have it because I promised this to my aunt, and I actually showed it to her, and I told her I was working on it, and he was like, yeah, but you worked on that while we were falling in love, and so he really wanted it, and I felt so bad. And so I finished it, and then I didn't frame it for the longest time because I didn't feel like I could give it away to her even though I had promised it, because I knew he wanted it. And so finally I came up with a solution, and my solution was to say to him, okay, I've promised this piece to somebody else. I know this isn't really going to be your style, so why don't we pick a design that you really like, and I will stitch that one specifically for you, and then I can frame this and send this to the person I promised it to. And so that was our agreement. And so my aunt has since received her piece and has been enjoying it for a couple of years. And this is the design that my husband picked out. This is a dimensions kit, and the design is called Purity, Strength, Truth. And this is what it looks like. This, I think, if I recall correctly from my spreadsheet, this took 54 days to stitch. And I started it in January of 2019, finished it in October of 2019, and had it framed for him. And it's deceptively simple looking. It's a beautiful design, but there is a ton of backstitch in these little dogwood blossoms that run all throughout, and there's a bunch of different colors. And this was the first kit that I had actually stitched in probably 25 years. I've been much more of a chart stitcher. And so I did not realize when I started stitching this that Dimensions uses one of the ways that one of the things that's unique to Dimensions is that they use varying thicknesses or varying numbers of floss. So they use a lot of blends in their charts, but they also use a lot of within those blends varying numbers of floss, and it can vary all the way from a single strand of floss up to 6 strands of floss to create the look of texture and depth within a design, which is a really interesting way to approach it, and I know a lot of people love that. But with this particular piece, I was not prepared for that. And what I had done, because I didn't realize that when I first bought it, that the kit actually came with Ada, which would have been more suitable for that particular way of stitching. And I replaced it with linen because I prefer to stitch on linen. And what ended up happening is because there are a lot of also half stitches, and some of these are, like I was saying, 5 or 6 strands of floss. By the time I had finished stitching this piece, it had pulled the linen out of alignment, and so it was all wonky. And so the lady that I took it to frame it, she used a, words, why are words so hard? She threaded it, she laced it on the back, and she wasn't able to get it perfectly straight. And if you see it up close, there's actually, you can see some puckering in the stitching as well. And I wasn't super happy with how she mounted it. I would have pinned it. I think we would have gotten a better result. But we ended up having to put the mat and the border here all the way up to the stitching to hide just how out of shape it had gotten. So not entirely thrilled with how this turned out, but it is a very pretty design, and my husband really loves it, and so I'm really happy I was able to stitch that for him. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at my whips, and I can show you what I've been working on since my last video. So you might recall that I had one day of stitching left to work on my my seasonal or gift stitch, which is Winter Queen by Shannon Christine Designs. So here's a picture of what that's going to look like when it's finished. And as I was telling you, I was really getting close to a finish, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish it in my last rotation. And so here's what it looked like the last time you saw it. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get that finished, but I wanted to give it an extra day. So I kind of snatched an extra day in addition to the one I knew I was supposed to have. So I spent another 2 days working on this after my last video. And I didn't make as much progress as I wanted to, but here's where I got to with it. And so I got almost all the way to the bottom of this icy tree. So this is something I should be able to finish up pretty quickly the next time I work on it. And then I also stitched in all of these beads, and the design actually calls for Krennic, and I prefer to work with Petite Treasure braid. So I've subbed that in. So there's a lot of PTB in here, and then all of these beads. This design is being stitched on 32 count Blue Fusion Jobelin by Silk Weaver. And as I was saying before, this is a fabric, I love stitching on this fabric because it's just got a nice weight to it, and it holds the stitches really well, and it just feels good to stitch on. And when I ordered it, I had no idea how beautiful it was going to be. There's just these beautiful little bits. It's mostly a blue and white mottled fabric, but up in this corner and then down in just various parts of the design, there's this beautiful little hint of pink that you can see. And it's so pretty, and I hadn't expected the pink in the design. I love it because it just adds a nice touch, and it looks like this Winter Queen is out for a walk on a frosty morning. So I really, really love that. The one thing that has been challenging, as I was talking about when I was showing you this design before, is I believe this fabric shrunk in the dyeing process. And I've enjoyed stitching on it as far as the coverage that I get, but it has been a little bit challenging to put in the beads, because as you know, 32 count is about as high as you can go with a standard size Mill Hill bead. And even then they can get a little crowded if there's a densely beaded area. In this design, because the actual count due to the shrinkage is closer to 36, I've had to get really creative, and there have been a couple places where I wasn't able to put in every single bead if it's a really densely beaded spot, simply because there's just not enough space on the fabric for it. So that's made the beading a little bit, normally I really enjoy beading. That particular facet has made the beading a little less enjoyable on this design, but that's okay. It's really beautiful. It's coming along. And so the only things I have left to do on this are finish this icy tree, the trunk right here, put in a few little sections of snowdrift, and then finish off her skirt, and then this pretty lady's gonna be done. So fingers crossed that the next time you see her, we will have a finish. So Winter Queen, that's Winter Queen. The next piece I worked on, and this again didn't get quite a full week as it should have, and that's okay. But the next piece I worked on is my full coverage piece. I'm going to put up a picture of what that will look like when it is finished. This is Rose Trellis In. It is a Heaven and Earth design chart for a Randall Spangler piece of art. And this is what it looked like the last time you saw it. And I spent, as I said, only 6 days working on this. And I had visions of making more progress, as I always do. But I'm actually pretty happy with where I ended up. So this is where I am now on it. Again, I continued to work down. I'm so close to being finished with there's just this little section of stitching here to finish, and then I'm done with the top row of pages. And so I'm really, really hoping that the next time I work on this, I feel really confident that unless the earth falls to pieces, which the way 2020 is going is entirely possible, but unless that happens, I feel pretty confident that the next time I work on this, I'll be able to finish these last few diagonals, get that top section done, and get started over here on the next row of pages. So really looking forward to, that's gonna feel like such a huge milestone, and I'm really looking forward to being able to do that. So this is where we are now on Rose Trellis In. And I'm stitching this on 28 count white Lugana, just in case I forgot to say that. Okay, the next piece I'm working on I worked on is my sampler, and that is the Rose Quaker sampler. This is a picture of what it's going to look like when it's finished. And this one is actually still on my scroll rods because I've been working on it this last week. Here's what it looked like the last time you saw it. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it up and show you where it is now. And because it's still on the scroll rod, I'm going to apologize. This one might be a little hard to see. I apologize. You may not, you're not going to see the whole design. Some of it is already rolled up. And so this one, I'm just going to tell you, this particular piece, I pulled it out this last Monday to start working for the full week of rotation on it. It very nearly went right back into timeout. So as I was getting to work, I started working on this massive rose motif, which literally took me 4 or 5 days to actually finally get finished. Part of that is because it's pretty dense stitching, and part of that is because it nearly sent me over the edge. So as I got to working on it, I discovered I was working in these leaves right down here, and I had stitched quite a bit of that in when it wasn't matching up where it was supposed to match up. And so I was like, what's going on? And did some counting, and I realized that first of all, this Z that's up here was it was high by 1 stitch. And so because I had counted off the Z to start stitching these, it wasn't matching up here. And so I ripped all of that out, grumpily started stitching it again, and something was still wrong. And so then I started counting up here, and I realized that not only was the Z counted off incorrectly, but where my start was up here was off by a couple of stitches. So I ended up pulling this out and restitching it 3 times. I am not gonna lie, there was a lot of adult language. There was a lot of abusive language toward monkeys and goats. It was not pretty. It's a good thing that only my husband was here to see it, because I was very upset. And so it's fine. It's beautiful. It's done. I never have to stitch that motif again. But my goodness, this piece really tested my patience this week. I've started working on this pretty little bouquet down here. I stitched in the S and the E. And one of the things that I decided to do, actually, you'll notice the A, the E, and the P are all in a different color from the rest of the letters. And I decided to do that because I wanted to stitch my initials in a brighter color so they stand out. I've seen a couple other folks do that with these designs. And I should mention, Rose Quaker Sampler, this is a design by Stickede van der Vienberg. I am stitching this on 32 count soft apricot linen by Color and Cotton. And I've seen some other folks who haven't, not this design particularly, but Ginger Gerald recently, just in the last few months, finished working on another Quaker sampler by the same designer. And he did that. He used a different color for his initials, and I thought that was such a fun idea, and so I decided to steal it and do that on my design. So working on a couple of different motifs throughout this design, and making good progress. So this is where I am on this. Okay. That is a monster frame, you guys. A monster. And then the last piece that I have been working on over the last couple of weeks, inching my way along toward a finish, but not quite there yet, is my travel piece. I am working on the August Cottage by Country Cottage Needleworks, stitching this on 28 count mushroom linen, mushroom Lugana. I don't know. Is it linen? Is it Lugana? I don't know. It's a Lugana. Yeah, sorry, brain fart. It's a Lugana. Stitching it with all the called for flosses. And slowly but surely, I'm gonna put up a picture of what it will look like when it's finished. And then we'll show you where I was the last time I was working on this. And then here's where I am right now. So I finished off all of the blue stitching in the house, and I finished off the roof. So the only thing I need to do there is finish putting in the windows and that door. I also finished off this tree, and so I need to put in one more seashell. And I'm working on the wave border at the bottom. So making good progress on this. I would have loved to get this finished, but I just didn't. You know, when I have limited stitching time because of other commitments, like I've had the last couple of weeks, I'm more apt to take the time that I do have to stitch to focus on the bigger pieces in my rotation so I can see progress on those, and my travel stitching suffers as a result. So it is what it is, but she's coming along and she's looking beautiful. And so there we go, August Cottage. Okay, so next thing I wanted to chat with you about, I did get a little bit of haul, and I've been really self-controlled. I actually have slowed down purchasing charts quite a bit, and one of the ways that I've helped myself to do that is what I've started doing in the last 6 or 7 months is if I see something that I like on somebody's Flosstube channel, or if I see something that I like in a shop, I will throw it onto my wish list on 123 Stitch, and I'll just let it sit there for a few months. And if I find that I'm coming back to it and I can't stop thinking about it, and this goes on for a couple of months, then I'm like, okay, this is something I really love and I will for sure stitch. As opposed to something that catches my eye and then maybe I come back and I see it later and I'm like, oh, that's really beautiful, but it's just not for me. And so these are all pieces that have been sitting on my wish list or on my unicorn list for a while. And because they've been there for a few months and I hadn't made any purchases for a while, I thought, all right, I'm going to indulge myself. And then immediately after I placed the order, not immediately, but shortly after I placed the order, the bear surgery became a reality for us. So it's a good thing I got these before it was too late. So a couple of things I've picked up recently. Easter Peep Parade. This is a Brenda Gervais chart with Dynelan thread. You guys have all seen this. It's adorable and I love it. So I'm looking forward to stitching that at some point. I also got one of the new charts by Madame Chantilly. This is the spring. It's called Celebrate Spring, and it's that adorable little tiered tray with all the spring things. You guys, have you seen, I don't know if you can see this, maybe I can throw a close-up picture of this. There's these little birds on swings. They're so cute. I cannot wait to stitch those. And there's just so many fun little elements in this tray. Oops, we'll get that later. The next thing is this is the Rose Core by Filigram. And I saw this on Instagram and I had never seen it before. I've never stitched anything by Filigram, but I thought it was really, really beautiful. So got that. Be Mine, a couple of pillows by Lila's Studio. Really, really pretty. I'm not typically I'm not usually one to stitch a lot of primitive, but there are more and more primitive things, thank you Flosstube, that are appealing to me. And so this was one that I've seen. And so not sure at what point I'll stitch this, but it's very pretty. And then the last thing that I got, you guys have all seen these. It's the Summer, Autumn, Winter collection by Blackbird Designs, the Loose Feathers, the 3-part sampler. So this one is high on my list of priorities to stitch, and I'm really excited that these were re-released and I was able to get them because these were on my unicorn list. So that's all of my haul, and probably you won't be seeing a lot of haul anytime soon. So let's wrap this up with me telling you what I'm going to be working on between now and my next video. I am going to spend the rest of today seeing how much I can get finished on my Rose Quaker sampler, and then after today we'll go away for another month, and I will be working again on Celtic Autumn. So I'll give that a good solid week. And after that, I am going to be pushing for a finish on my Winter Queen. I really, really, really want to get her done. And I think that, again, unless the world completely falls apart, I should be able to finish her the next time I pull her out. And if I do get her finished, then hopefully I will have enough time for my next new start. And I'm really looking forward. This is something that I have been waiting to start for a couple of months now. Becca Sambry Stitches, everybody stitched this last year, but Becca stitched it and did a beautiful finish on it. And I am going to be stitching the Primitive Merry Christmas pillow by Abby Rose Designs. So this is going to be, I'm looking forward to it because it's a lot smaller than what I normally would have in my rotation. So it's really going to be fun to have something that is smaller and quick to finish. And I have a couple of seasonal designs that I'm hoping to cycle through fairly quickly. And get a lot of finishes and get a lot of things ready that I can start displaying for the various seasonal decor. So hoping to have that as a new start to show you the next time I come back to film. And then also we'll continue to work on my August cottage. And it's probably too much to hope for that I would have 2 finishes to show you and 2 new starts. But maybe I will also get the August cottage finished and then be able to move on. So I've already stitched all of the cottages from September through December. So if I finish August cottage, I will get started on the January cottage. We will see. Again, probably too much to hope. I'm probably too ambitious, but it's always possible. So thank you again for hanging out with me today. It's been really great to have you. Thank you so much for coming back. Or if you're new, I'm so glad you decided to check things out. If you like this video and you like what I'm working on, please hit the like button, subscribe, feel free to comment or share. I'd love it if you followed me on Instagram. I show my progress on a weekly basis there, and my name is @globetrotting_stitcher. And if you hit the little bell, you'll get notifications when I put up a new video. So I hope that you all stay healthy, stay happy, take care of yourselves, and just stitch on all the things that make you happy. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.